Alrighty. Why can't? Oh, it's just super delayed. Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3.
You are good on Twitch. And YouTube is delayed before the first test. Alright, go on YouTube.
All right, you ready to get started?
Yes, sir.
Hello and welcome to episode 202 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we actually have quite a bit to talk about. There was a bunch of stuff that happened right after we did our last show that we will finally get to talk about, and some stuff that just happened in the few days since, and I think is really important, at least moving forward into the 2026 part of the new season. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
Yeah, doing all right. Happy fantasy football playoff season to anybody participating in that. And happy holiday season with Christmas coming up next week. Not sure if we'll do another show. I probably could have said this at the end, but whatever. But yeah, like you said, we got a decent amount of stuff to talk about. It's looking light in the notes, but I know based on the topics that we have here, this could very easily be an hour and a half show. That doesn't seem like it could be an hour and a half show. So I'm ready to jump right in.
Yeah, so we talked about on the last episode, or really the last two episodes, we've talked about like the state of COD and what's going on with Call of Duty. And 2 episodes ago, we were relatively optimistic, and then last episode ago, we were very pessimistic about especially the next Call of Duty, and that is supposedly, reportedly, Modern Warfare 4, and it's coming from Infinity Ward. We know that for sure, and the report that we talked about on the last episode was that Modern Warfare 4 would basically be a copy of MW2 from a few years ago. MW3 that came out the following year was pretty much a copy of MW2 already with some minor tweaks. So that would make three very similar games within the span of 4 or 5 years, all coming from the same developer. We talked about how horrible that would be, and especially with how poorly received in terms of the sales Black Ops 7 has been so far this year. That could be very troubling for the future of Call of Duty. It might spur some changes, pretty radical changes from Microsoft. Well, Infinity Ward, maybe they heard what we were talking about on the Ego Chall podcast. We appreciate their support. They tweeted at 4:41 p.m. on December 15th. Happy holidays, everybody. Wishing our community an awesome holiday season and looking forward to talking soon. Don't believe everything you read on the internet. See you in 2026. So obviously this got quite a bit of traction because the Ghost of Hope, who had done a lot of, he did the reporting and said, like, this is, from what I've been told, a copy of MW2. So people just hopped in the comments and were adding him about this. And I just don't really know what to make of this, because I don't know if it's a good thing that they responded at all or even mentioned this, because it's one of those things, like, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you respond, it makes you look guilty. And if you don't respond, it makes you look guilty. And there's no other way to kind of like prove their innocence in a sense, but just releasing a good game that isn't a copy of MW2. What was your take on Infinity Ward not directly responding, but certainly discussing it internally?
Yeah, I was reminded of another because IW responds, so then Ghost of Hope had a joke right back to of like something that was like one of I'm assuming COD Next or whatever before MW2, and they were basically talking about like um just PR BS that they were
Yeah.
saying to try and hype up that game, and that's like Ghost of Hope's like, yeah, don't believe everything you read on the internet, guys. And it was a video of one of the devs talking about what to expect from MW2 at that time. So I thought that was pretty funny. But yeah, I mean honestly, I thought it was the funniest part that this tweet literally happened. I'm pretty sure it was 13 minutes exactly after we ended our show last episode. So I was like, of course, that's funny. And then the next thing with the first roster change of the season, that happened like 10 minutes after this IW tweet too. So just par for the course for the Ego Chall podcast. But yeah, overall, I mean, this is really, I think you did put it best. It's like, if they don't say anything about it, then everyone's going to joke about, them never addressing it. And if they do just put out a tweet like this, like, it's like everyone, there really isn't a win situation there for the devs, I feel like. And, I do think you really did say it best. It's like the best thing you can do now is put out an actual good game that isn't a carbon copy of one of the most uh, unenjoyable titles that we've had in recent years. So yeah, I think, I mean, it's all fine and good to talk about this stuff now, but end of the day, there's a lot of time between now and when we even get our first teaser for uh, this upcoming game, let alone the trailer and then the beta and all that stuff. So there's time, and I do think that's, trying to stay positive. The one thing is that this coming to light early does give uh, the devs potential time to correct course. The question of whether they will or not is very much up for debate, but they, in theory, have the time to make some changes uh, to move away from this reported copy if they so choose to do so.
This isn't a direct analog to what we're going through right now, but I was going through Ghost of Hope's Twitter, and one of his recent retweets was a tweet from Charlie Intel from 2022. And that tweet was a screenshot of a Call of Duty blog where people from IW were talking about the upcoming Modern Warfare 2 release. And Joel Emsley, the studio art director at Infinity Ward, said that Modern Warfare 2 represents one of the most, quote, ambitious, beautiful, bombastic, melt-your-face-off game Infinity Ward has ever created. He said, this is the studio's magnum opus, and it's the type of game I've been waiting to be part of my entire career. Joel is a fucking idiot. I will just put it right out there. Like, that was so, like, I get you got to be an advertiser, you got to be a promoter. Do not say some shit like that if you're going to put out Modern Warfare 2. Unless it's Modern Warfare 2 from like 2010, then you can say some shit like that. And like people will be like, yeah, that game was fucking awesome. Great job, Joel. Do not say that about Modern Warfare 2 2022. And granted, Modern Warfare 2 in 2022 was not like the thing that people really gave them grief over. It was Modern Warfare 3. It was the fact that a year afterward, they basically just put out the same exact game and they charged $70 for it, which obviously that was not the report. That was not what their intention was, I think, at the time. It was about putting out a DLC and that it would be half price or whatever. But the fact remains that they charged $70 for basically the copy of the product that they had already made that wasn't even well received at the time. So I just think like that is a ridiculous thing to say. Granted, that was 3.5 years ago, so maybe he had a different view of what things were going to be like in the Call of Duty space. But that was an incredible misstep. And that also points to like IW, maybe not the most like honest, I would say, about like what's going on with their Call of Duty games, because I'm sure there's quotes that we can pull from their Modern Warfare 3 release that this is like, we've improved so much about this game and like it's a great game, when people just said like these games actually kind of suck too. I just think it's there's no reason, and I said this I think on either the last episode or 2 episodes ago, but like they don't have any kind of you don't need to trust them. Like there's no kind of trust that are between the consumer in this part and IW, because they've just put out games that aren't very entertaining, and they've oftentimes not been able to live up to the hype of some of these games. And certainly the Modern Warfare label that has been like very historic. Like if you look back through like even MW3, which was not as well received, like the first MW3 was not as well received as a lot of the other games that had been released by IW previously. But even then, that game looks like, literally it looks like the magnum opus if you compare it to some of the games that they've released since then. So I just thought I'd point that out because I thought it was pretty interesting. Anything else on this before we move on?
No, I think like we basically said everything that we need to at this point, and it's just gonna be, I hate the to say time will tell, but we're gonna have to wait and see. It's December 2025 at this point, so anything else we say on this really might not matter at the end of the day, or maybe this is the kick in the butt that devs needed to get into gear and give us the game we deserve, which is not even we, but the fans deserve. But it's a weird statement to make, just give it like a little off topic, but it feels like this report, because of the timing of it, like when this stuff was happening, Black Ops 7 was out for a month at most. Like it might not have even officially been a month yet. And I've really enjoyed Black Ops 7. I feel like the community sentiment around it has been pretty decent from like a casual perspective. Obviously there's the gripes and complaints of the competitive community, but that's coming with any game, even if it's literally the best game of all time. So, but I feel like this conversation has taken away a little bit from just what Black Ops 7 is, and it's like people are already preparing their pitchforks and torches for the next game when the current game has only been out a month at most, maybe a little under a month when all this started. So that is a little weird, but hopefully this calendar turns to 2026, people can enjoy Black Ops 7 for a couple months, and then we'll start getting into like the official leak season for the next game.
And a few hours after that post, and we literally talked about like something related to this on our last show, but the Vancouver Surge announced that they were benching Lqgend. That was at 7 p.m. Eastern on December 15th, and like you said, we did our show like 3 or 4 p.m. So like really, and we've been saying for pretty much the entire time since Lqgend was announced on this roster, and this roster was announced, was that this team needed to stick together for at least, I don't know if you agreed particularly with what I said, but through Major 2. Like that should be the goal, is like assess things after Major 2, because that gives you almost 20 qualifying matches, that gives you LAN time, that at least 2 LAN matches, like even if you got double first rounded. So like that really gives you a lot of time and a lot of matches to see what is there with Lqgend or just this roster in general. He ends up getting 2 weeks, and that's pretty crazy to think about. Granted, we talked about it on the show, Vancouver is the only team left in the league that has not won a map in the CDL season. They've also played a pretty good schedule to this point, and Lqgend had the worst KD of all 48 players in the CDL to this point. So there are reasons that you can say, yes, obviously he's not ready for the CDL. I would also say, if he wasn't ready for the CDL, why the hell did you sign him in the first place? Why was he a starter in the first place? And if you changed your mind so much from 2 months ago, whenever he was signed, to now, that shows a complete lack of faith, a complete lack of forward thinking, a complete lack of planning on the Vancouver Surge's part. And I put in the title, did Surge fail Lqgend? And it's an unequivocal yes for me.
Oh, yeah.
There is no other way to point to this. I think people said, like, yeah, he needs to be in challengers. It was a mistake to sign him. Maybe all of that is true.
Yes.
The point remains, he was in the CDL. He started in the CDL. I think of it quite like an NFL rookie quarterback. A lot of people say, don't start them right out of the gate. Put them behind a veteran quarterback, let them learn, let them kind of see what's going on from the sidelines. And that would be basically the equivalent of challengers in the Call of Duty League. Mm-hmm. I understand that point of view. But if you're going to start him from day one, you can never bench him until it's he's gone. He's a lost project. He's damaged goods. At that point, you can bench him, you trade him, you release him, whatever. You cannot bench him until that is the case. And they're not releasing him which would be kind of like he's done. Like, we don't care about him. So they're benching him. You can't, like, to me, that is an incredible, it's malpractice, honestly. It is organizational malpractice. This is something my beloved Cleveland Browns would do and have done many, many times. And you don't want to be compared to the Cleveland Browns in pretty much any respect. So this is incredible malpractice by the Vancouver Surge. The whole operation kind of needs to be looked at differently now. And I feel bad for Legend. He had a very graceful statement and graceful comments about what's going on. He did not need to be that graceful, but I understand, like, he's got a future that he has to look out for. I don't know if I would have been as respectful and as professional in that scenario as him. But I would like to get your take on this, because this is something that we are both pretty passionate about and we've talked about quite a bit over the last few months. So what is your kind of sense of this situation with Legend and the Surge?
Yeah, I, wholeheartedly agree with basically everything you said, and I was pretty heated when this news dropped, just because that was I'm pretty sure I literally said it last episode, like when we're covering Vancouver's matches. It's like, you sign this guy who has no previous competitive Call of Duty history and immediately give him a CDL shot, and then you bench him after 3 or 4 games. That just makes absolutely no sense to me. What it does scream to me is that there has to have been some sort of miscommunication, either between management, the organizational side, and then whoever's GM, coach, players, whoever's putting the roster together, and the goals for the season. Because this is a move that it feels like the organization makes. It's like, oh, we're off to, haven't won a map yet, we got to make a move to win now. But then you look at this roster when it was formed, and the conversation I have been saying is, I think this team is at the bottom right now, but they have the potential to improve throughout the season. It was not a team that you ever expect to win right out of the gate, especially given Legend's lack of experience in competitive Call of Duty. There was even something I saw on Twitter, like Legend didn't even have the right attachments on his SMG.
Yeah,
Like,
I think Zuma said he had long barrel or something.
Yeah, or something like, and it's like, I haven't played any of the recent Halos, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I'm pretty sure there aren't even weapon attachments in Halo, unless they changed that over the years since I played Halo 2 or whatever it was. And even if there were, I doubt there's this whole, like, since Warzone was released, where there's 50,000 attachments for every single gun. Like, Legends never had to deal with that before. I feel pretty safe in making that statement. And if he has, then I guess I'm an idiot. But that aside, like, that's just one example of how, this kid wasn't even set up for success and is immediately benched after 3 games, 3 losses, however you want to
Online
phrase
matches
it. Like,
too.
yeah, and it's just like, if I the conversation would have been totally different if Surge wanted to sign him as a substitute to start the year in Challengers, and then if he fries in Challengers, he's on Vancouver, you just call him up to the roster. Like, if they made that move, that's probably, in hindsight, that's probably what any team that wanted uh or showed interest in having Legend be a pro Call of Duty player, that's probably what they should have done, instead of just throwing him into the fire of the CDL with no experience. But yeah, I mean, this is just, it makes absolutely no sense. Like, the goals of whoever is in charge of Vancouver, what they're trying to accomplish this year, doesn't align with that initial roster construction of a team where the most veteran player on the team was a guy who won Rookie of the Year 2 seasons ago. Like, it just, I really was at a loss for words. And I don't necessarily feel bad for Legend, because, like you said, he did have a pretty good statement, and I mean, he was honest and reflective on, he knows he didn't play well. I mean, it is what it is. He wasn't put in a position to succeed, and you know it showed that he didn't have the experience to compete at this level. But now he has an opportunity, go down to challengers, potentially gain that experience that he's lacking, play against players that he might have find more success against in the lower levels, And I will say the positive here is that Vancouver did keep him, at least seemingly, because of the phrasing of benched versus released. If they just straight up released him, I I would have lost it. But the good thing of him still being under contract is if he does go down in Fry and Challengers, they have the option to return him to the CDL even this year. Um, so that's, one silver lining to this whole thing. I don't know if I really see him getting another chance in the CDL this year, unless like Vancouver just really continues to struggle and they're just like, yeah, screw it. Then we're tanking for the first overall pick that doesn't exist. And it's like, well, if you were doing that to begin with, then why'd we even bench Legend? So this is really a messed up situation. It does. I mean, I know there's been some changes with like luminosity and ownership and stuff over there, so I don't really know like the whole organizational situation now for Vancouver. But I mean, in hindsight, it makes a little more sense now how their team from last year that had a really, really good head coach and made 4 grand finals but didn't win them. That entire team just went separate ways, like all 5 people involved. Um, So maybe it's something on the organizational side, but I mean, you get rid of that team and then you bring in a team of young guys to try and develop them, at least seemingly that's what it looked like on paper, but then you bench the guy that you're seemingly trying to develop. It really, the whole thing is I mean, sucks for you as a Cleveland Browns fan, but I think that was a phenomenal analogy to make in this situation.
It does feel like really like an NFL kind of decision making process where you have an owner and a GM and a coach, like 3 different people that have just different goals and different ideas for how the team is going to perform or what the expectations are. And those people don't talk to each other as honestly as maybe they should. And because when you were explaining it, it really did sound like the maybe the Colts from a few years ago where they draft Anthony Richardson and like they kind of throw him into the fire, and it's like he was not a like
Yeah, that's
high
another
like
good one.
he's a highly touted prospect because of the potential, but not in the
Yes.
moment. And like so when you throw him out there, it's like you got to let him like cook and burn. Like you really need to let him do his thing and hope that it works out for him. If it doesn't, so be it. But like you it's not and that's really the biggest part of like we all I think as a community understood when Vancouver signed this roster that this isn't necessarily a bad roster. This isn't like a roster that we like look at kind of like Cloud9 and be like, I don't see the potential. I don't see like the ceiling being incredibly high for this team. It has a high floor, and we think that could help them certainly in the early going of the season and maybe even qualify for champs. But we don't see the ceiling being particularly high. With Vancouver, it's like the complete opposite. It's like the floor is kind of like ground level. Like if none of these guys really pan out, and it's not just Legend, but Lunar's like he's basically like getting a chance as well because he had a horrible rookie season on one of the worst teams in the league, and you can understand if people are like not incredibly hyped about this roster coming out of the gate. Like Gwen is the shining example. Like he's the guy that you hope Legend and Lunars end up being. But you got to give them time. And they just never gave him time. They gave him 2 weeks and gave him 3 matches, 3 online matches, and said, "Yeah, we're good on that, and we're gonna move on." I think it's horrible. Like it's not like I'm gonna cry over Legend, but it's the idea that like you gotta be consistent. Like if you like this is just kind of an inconsistent, incoherent move based on like what the roster construction would indicate coming into the season. That's really all it is. Like if Cloud9 made a move right now, where they bench someone, you're like, yeah, I never really thought like this is like a long-term thing, like whatever. But when you sign all these young guys, there's no veteran on this team, and we'll get to it in just a moment, but like there's no veteran on this team, and you're just expecting them to come out of the gate slow, and then they do, and then it's like, well, who could have seen this coming? And we have to make changes now. So, yeah, not great. And reportedly, TJ will be replacing Legend in this roster. like that does give them the veteran presence, right? Like he has been around.
Does it?
Well, it gives them a lot of experience. I don't know how much veteran leadership TJ brings to a
Exactly.
team,
Yeah.
and
Love TJ, but he's not like the shining example of somebody who's like gonna mold players or anything like that. Maybe he matures on this roster and this is the opportunity he gets, but um that's not just exactly the type of guy that I think of when I think of like a veteran who's going to lead a team of three younger players. He does have the experience with playing with Gwyn before though. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, I was just thinking like he doesn't really have. He has like a ton of experience, but he doesn't have a ton of experience being like the vet, like the
Correct.
guy that has just like. I'm trying to look through it because I think Boston might be an example where he's like the most.
Maybe
Like
after Methods retired.
yeah, that's what I was thinking because like, so it was Methods, Nero, Vivid, and Awakening. So like obviously, like Awakening had been around like a few years, but like these guys were all relatively young. Like Vivid, I mean Vivid's still like a vet. So I mean I don't know like it's I have no idea. Like it feels like did TJ even play on this team without Methods? I don't think so. So like
That must have been different Boston era.
yeah, so yeah, I don't know if there's any scenario where he's been in a position where like even when he was on Carolina, like obviously Slasher is your veteran presence. Like he's the guy that like, better or for worse, like he's the guy that's probably going to shout down some things on his team. And I just I don't know. Like TJ is a much like let's be real. TJ is a much better player right now than Legend is. I don't think anybody really has like an argument for that. But like that's not the point. Like the point is that it's like a future. TJ has been on a bunch of CDL teams for a reason. It's because nobody really seems to think that he can be part of their long-term future. They don't see him as kind of like a franchise cornerstone or anything because he's been on OGLA, LAT, Boston, the Legion, Carolina, Falcons, and now reportedly going to be the Vancouver Surge. So that's 7 CDL teams. Granted, Legion and Falcons were both Vegas teams or whatever, but still like 7 different iterations of a CDL team. That's more than half the league. And that just shows, and we've seen it over the years, like people just don't see TJ as like the long-term solution on their team. The longest he's been on a team is Carolina, and I think he was gone. He came in, then he was gone, and then he came back in. So I just don't see it. And what do you think about this idea of TJ potentially coming in to replace Legend on this team?
I mean, that's just like bouncing back to what we were talking about with Legend. Like, this is a move that, especially based on the way TJ has played early on this year in Challengers, he's played really well as a part of the Barstool squad. Um, TJ feels like the move that a team would have made as like a win now move. It's not a
Yeah.
move looking towards the future or anything like you said. Like you add someone like TJ to your squad if you're trying to win right now, and that's why this just the whole situation just really doesn't make a ton of sense to me because the Vancouver roster was never a win now roster to begin with, but now it feels like maybe they're trying to be that, but is just TJ enough to make this a win now roster? I don't know. Um like I said, I do think, that past experience he has with Gwen, obviously they were at times they had some good success in search and destroy, particularly with Vivid and Slasher as well. That's just Vivid, Slasher, and TJ are 3 really good S&D players, and Gwen kind of was just like the main Slayer who just had to kill the people put in front of him when he's put in the right spots. But Gwen's been a pretty good search and destroy player in his time as the league. Whether that's a result of him being a good S&D player or like the system around him. That I think this year will be our chance to really get to see a little bit more of that or get a better answer. But now with TJ, maybe this is the next evolution of TJ, the next step for him to become that leader, a shot caller in S&D potentially. Like I said, he's been frying in challengers, but joining this team, he doesn't necessarily like. He still has to put up numbers because that was a big reason why Vancouver was struggling. Like Legend was statistically underperforming as expected. But Gwyn has not struggled regardless of the roster he's been on, whether it's in past years or so far this year. He's still putting up the numbers. So maybe the little extra slaying boost that TJ gives over Legend at this particular time is enough to turn things around for Vancouver. I'm not particularly hopeful, but I think at the least it should help them like get a map on the board. Like they should be able to win an S&D now with if TJ and Gwen both pop off or something like that. So um yeah, I think happy for TJ that he's back in the league. Obviously, I don't know. The whole Vancouver situation really has just got my head spinning because that's what I started by saying this feels like a win now move for a team that was never seemingly in a position to be a win now team.
And they're not going to win now. So you're like, TJ's better than Legend, but like he's not. I mean, like there's a reason he was in challengers to start the season. Like he's not going to be the guy to like turn around this team. Like maybe they get to champs. Like I think that should be the goal of this team. And
Sure, yeah.
when we say that all the time about these like mid-tier to lower tier teams in the CDLs, like the goal is not to win championships. Like that's an unrealistic goal for most of the teams, or maybe not most of the teams, but like quite a few of the teams in the CDL. The goal is by the end of the season to be 8th or better in the standings. And that's like, I think that was still a realistic goal for the Vancouver Surge if they kept Legend in the roster, because 8th is not some crazy high bar. Like we've seen some really bad teams kind of limp into 8th. Obviously we saw the Subliners like several years ago. They were horrible, and then they had a really great run and they were in 8th place, and it all kind of worked out for them. Boston Breach were very kind of like hit or miss last season, and they got 8th place. Optic lost 19 matches in a row or whatever it was, and like they ended up getting, I think, 7th place because they jumped Boston. So last thing I'll say is make sure we get the statements from both of these. So Arturo said, Legend has a high ceiling, a lot of upside, gives them time and space to continue developing without the pressure of immediate results, who believed in potential and remain confident in his future. And then Legend said it was obviously absurd to be in the CDL with zero COD competitive experience under my belt. Got the offer, thought it was an opportunity of a lifetime, and you can't refuse it. Grateful opportunity, and learned a lot playing against the best players in COD.
That's one thing. Go ahead, sorry.
I was gonna say, like, that's the biggest part of this is like he got the offer, and it's like if you get the offer to play in the CDL versus like I'm gonna kind of grind out in challengers and maybe I never make it to the CDL, like that's the reason why you would do this for him. And I completely agree with his thought process. Is like I will get to the salaries bit later, but like he's not getting paid that in challengers, so you might as well take it when you can get it.
No, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It's like you can't fault Legend here in
No.
any of this outside of his like performance in game, and even that, like if he's being set up with the wrong classes and stuff, that you can argue that for days. But like guy saying like he's very self-aware in the sense of it was pretty ridiculous for him to just get this opportunity without any experience, but he's like, yeah, screw it. Why would I say no? Like if a CDL org came to me tomorrow and was like, hey, you want to come play in the CDL? I'm like, hell yeah, I want to play in the CDL. Like I might get shit on and drop 0.5, but I'm going. Like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna turn down the offer if I get it. So that you can't blame him for that either.
Yeah, I mean if a quarterback can go number 1 to the worst team in the league, or take like a like a training camp contract on like the Super Bowl contender and like sit behind like whatever the best quarterback is, like, I mean, obviously the guy's gonna be like, I'm gonna take like the guaranteed like $50 million, and like even if I break my leg on the first snap and like never play another game, like at least I made quite a bit of money and like I got to say like I did it, and it's like the opportunity to turn into something great. And he took this opportunity and it didn't work out for him here, but I mean, and I made this comparison a few weeks ago, but like Purge was like completely lambasted when he got into the CDL, and here we are like 3 years later and he's still in the CDL, and like he's not the best player, but like he's a very serviceable CDL player, and I think that's a good outcome, right? For a lot of these players, even if Legend might have like higher expectations for himself, or people might have higher expectations considering his background. But I wish him the best, and I did want to point out it was something that the CD Challengers Intel tweeted right after he was benched, and he said that Legend will come into Challengers with 6,000 pro points. Because he played 2 active weeks in the CDL. This puts him as the leading pro points player in the whole of Challengers by over double. So nobody even has 3,000. He would be the number 10 seed just based on his pro points alone. So, I mean, the good thing is like being in the CDL just for 2 weeks kind of set him up perfectly for Challengers, because every like contending team or even semi-contending team in Challengers is like, well, even if he sucks, like he will get us some pro points and like he'll put us in a good seed, and maybe we can work something out there. So that's a good thing for him for sure. The next biggest thing, or maybe not next biggest, but certainly one of the biggest topics that we talked about on last week's show was this meteoric rise of Alluka, the German rookie in Challengers, who dropped like a 2.25 KD, in a series, and was just like absolutely insane for at least one weekend. That got everybody's attention, and apparently it got literally attention of half of the CDL, because after this kind of like star-making performance in Challengers, Alluka drew interest from literally half of the CDL teams, who reached out and just to kind of see what was going on with Alluka, according to Rafi. And I think that's a pretty crazy thing to think about, is that I think people knew about him. Like, I'm sure there were like teams that were kind of keeping their eye on him, but it wasn't until this one performance, literally one weekend, has basically changed his life, aka Mercules, because Mercules was a Challengers player. He was probably on people's radar, I'm sure, when he was in Challengers, but then he gets a shot at that major, and the rest is history. And his career is completely different. His life is completely different, and it looks to be kind of a similar situation. Obviously, not on as like crazy high stakes as Mercules, but Alluka now has drawn a ton of interest from CDL teams, reportedly. And according to Ronnie Intel, FaZe Vegas is kind of circling and potentially going to sign him as a substitute, at least initially. That's a really, really interesting development, because we talked about LA Thieves as maybe the landing spot, especially with how poorly Kenny played last week, and LAT historically being kind of like a if there's a guy, let's go get this guy kind of org. FaZe being the one is even more intriguing, because I would not expect that based on obviously the roster that they signed over the offseason, and even a little bit how they've looked so far, even though it's kind of been hit or miss, but I think they're still like one of the top 4 teams in the league. So what do you think about FaZe potentially being the team to pick up Alluka?
Yeah, so did I close? Oh no, I didn't. So first and foremost on Alluka, head Ego Chall correspondent Tremi did reach out to me after our last episode, and I'm just gonna read the message from. So this is from Trem. From watching last pod regarding Alluka lore that I don't think you or PSOG would know, he's been an S&D god since Black Ops 4 and has played with and against Illy, Merc, S&D Dylan, etc. I don't think this comes as a shock to anyone who follows the S&D scene. He was like top 5 in most elite wins last year. That's also why no pro S&D star is saying he hacks. So I thought that was interesting that he has that experience with Illy. And my immediate question was, does that mean Alluka has been in the U.S. this whole time? Because in my head, like, if this young kid has been playing with Illy, like surely Illy doesn't want to play for thousands of dollars with some kid playing on 200 ping in Germany. And Tremi admittedly said that does confuse me. I think he moved ahead in preparation of BO7 Challengers, but last time he was live before this weekend, this was obviously at our last show, so a couple weeks ago now. Uh, he was still in Germany, according to Tremor, because when Illy played with him, he was always on 100 plus ping. So that is just pretty crazy to me for start that like someone like Illy, who obviously we've sung his praises as far as it concerns in S&D and stuff, was willing to play with this kit. Like, if Illy's playing for thousands of dollars, he probably wants somebody who's really good at S&D and has good internet connection. But if he's willing to take a hit on the internet connection, then obviously he knows what he's getting, like skill wise, from this player. So I found that really interesting. Obviously, shout out Tremi for the info. Definitely wouldn't have been able to provide any of that to the fans or anything like that. And I haven't really seen any conversation around like Alluka's S&D past, even through this like stellar PR campaign that he's received over the last week plus. So I thought that was some interesting, fresh info there too. So, going back to the FaZe thing, I do think that the whole like question of his visa status and eligibility to join a team is the biggest question right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you put that tweet in the notes from Cruz talking about that, so I'll let you get to that in a bit. But that does most likely put a wrinkle in things and would make a little sense if this whole report of him uh, reportedly joining FaZe's bench for now, like I just think that's an A+ move from FaZe. Like they don't have to change up the roster after 3 matches like Vancouver, but they now have like a silver bullet sitting in the back, like waiting. Like if they get the visa sorted out and they officially do sign him as a substitute, like that's pretty awesome. So, and it does remind me of the whole EU cadet thing,
Mm-hmm.
which, coincidentally is how Simp got his first shot. Like EU United recognized Simp's talent early on, signed him to the cadet squad. As soon as he turned 18, he was promoted to the main squad. Obviously, it's a little different here with Alluka, like age-wise, but like now that instead of age, it would just be the visa status. And like if FaZe signs him to be a sub, they get the visa sorted out, he will be like immediately eligible to give this roster a boost if they so need it. And if FaZe goes on a tear, then in theory, FaZe would be in a position to hold on to Alluka for this season and potentially add him to the roster next year, which I wouldn't be a fan of. Obviously, I would like to see Alluka play at this highest level, or FaZe would be in a position to potentially sell/trade Alluka to another squad that might need him more. And then that's a really good business transaction for the FaZe squad. So I really like this move if it does come to fruition. Obviously, it does seem like there are going to be multiple hurdles to jump for any team looking to acquire him immediately. But I'm all in, as I said last episode, on the Alluka hype train. And after hearing everything from Trem and everything like that, there are even some clips of him talking trash with Shotzi and Shotzi biting back and saying he sucks, and just some good banter there. So I'm all in. I would love to see Alluka in the CDL as soon as possible. Whether that as soon as possible is the start of 2026 or later this year or next year, that's the biggest question.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it would be really soon, especially because this is like a weird time of the year where like pretty much every country kind of shuts down for like the next week or two. And um, like even then, like the United States has a really iffy visa like issue that's going on, like especially with like esports. Like I mean, that's always been a tricky thing because it's not like you're a famous soccer player and then you're coming over like famous basketball player, like, and you have like these billion-dollar corporations kind of like hinging on like, hey, like we need Victor Wembanyama to get through customs, like that's kind of the analog here, and that's not something that kind of works in esports favor more times than not. We've seen it like not even Call of Duty, which has had like its fair share. Beans being a great example, because the only reason that Mercury's got that chance was because Beans couldn't get in the country for that major, and it just turned out to be this incredible performance for a kid that really needed the opportunity. It seems like it's going to kind of be the exact opposite for Luka, where he's going to have to wait. So Methods first tweeted about it. He said, I have to assume it's only the bench spot for now, as we'll have to change his visa from a student to a work visa, which will likely force him to return home, then re-enter the country. I don't see a world where this move is made and approved unless he's guaranteed to start. And then Cruz, like you mentioned, Cruz is obviously not as well known as Methods, but Cruz is a New Zealand native, and he came to the United States on a student visa, as far as I know, and was like going to nursing school in Oklahoma while playing in challengers and like the collegiate COD league and all that stuff. So like he has a pretty, I would assume, like very extensive experience with this kind of stuff. And he said, I don't think people quite understand how hard it is to join a team midseason and get a visa sorted when you aren't a U.S. citizen. Being on the bench makes sense because he can sort his visa on the bench when they can bring him in if they want after. And then he responded to comments, said, and the other person said, I don't know how visas work that well, but being here for 4 months, if on a student visa already trying to get an athletic looks odd, I'd imagine a big org like FaZe bringing him in will make the argument a lot easier, I'd imagine. And Cruz said he would have to travel home to get the interview, which sometimes takes a while. Then the processing is extra time, not enough to be match ready in a week or two. So I think that gives you kind of an idea of what we're looking at with Alluka. It just seems like it's kind of like a not an if, but a when with him. And maybe it's a while. We've seen Real have visa issues, and that led to his departure from the Carolina Royal Ravens and found him a spot on the Miami Heretics. Coincidentally, the Miami Heretics had to wait for Trakes to get his visa sorted this season, so he didn't play in the preseason cups with them. But he was ready by the time that the CDL actually started. Who knows what I think it's like kind of like a concussion situation is like you never really know when they're going to come back. Like it's different for everybody, and you just kind of hope and pray that it resolves itself quickly and cleanly. So I hope the best for him. I hope that he's able to kind of get here soon. Also, like if Tremi, he's saying that he was back in Germany then. Hopefully that means like he can start the process if he already hadn't. Start it now, like do his interviews and stuff and like get it sorted out so it can move as quickly as possible, because it would suck for a guy like this not to be able to kind of capitalize on this as quickly as possible, and like for us as fans to experience like another rookie sensation, which is very exciting. I would say it's one of the more exciting parts of the CDL, and we've seen it so many times over the years, whether it be someone like Simp, whether it be Celium to an extent with FaZe in BO4. Obviously, Mercules. Hydra was a little bit different of a situation because he had like a language barrier that really had to kind of work itself out as well. And, I think even like a cultural shift that he was going through where he came to the United States and they put him in challengers to start. I think Alluka would still be able to play in challengers, although he would probably be be playing from Germany. I don't know what the rules are, to be quite honest about that, but like, I don't like it might just be up to his team, or, he might have a really hard time, but I do think that it'd be, or maybe he just joins like an EU challengers team while that's going on. So a lot of ifs, a lot of kind of variables with this situation, but pretty exciting things I think to come for him. And Simp and Alluka on the same team. Like if Alluka is as good in the CDL as we think he could be, man, that's some crazy stuff going on. And that would also, I think the last part I'll say is like, it does put FaZe in a weird position because we don't have a lot of these situations going on where there's like a clear player on the bench that is like, whenever he's ready, like one of you guys are getting benched or you're getting dropped for that guy. It's United is the best example of that, because when Simp was like, we were waiting to see when he turned 18, those guys that were on the roster, then it's like, all right, one of you's going. Like there's not going to be someone like that's going to take Simp's spot. So you're going to have to get up out of here. And I think it might have been JCap, which I don't like that timing sounds about right. Granted, there was a lot of stuff going on between like J-Cap and Clay at the time, but it all worked out for United, and I hope it all works out for Alluka and FaZe, because this would be kind of insane if he could come in. The only other thing is like if FaZe really kind of turns a corner and they're looking really really good, and then Alluka's visa situation gets cleared up, like what happens then? Like if they're really cooking and like the best team in the CDL, and then he kind of becomes available, what do you do in that kind of situation? So I think there's a lot of stuff that could happen. Any kind of last words on Alluka and this FaZe situation?
No, I guess you did mention it, but I did just to reiterate too. Omid Rafi saying that literally half the league slash
Mm-hmm.
6 teams in the CDL showed an interest in Alluka over that. That just further heightens the whole PR campaign for this like meteoric rise that he's on, and it is. That number could change. It could be even more than six since that conversation started, but um, the fact that it was immediately half the league reportedly reaching out to Rafi about this guy, like that just speaks to you know the talent that a lot of people are already seeing in this young kid. And like I said, I'm all full in on the hype train, and I can't wait for this situation to develop, no matter how it does, unless obviously it results in him not coming to the CDL. That would be worst case scenario, but feels like it's just a matter of when, not if, Alluka will be in the CDL, and whenever that does happen, I'm super excited.
Yeah, it's I man, I really hate the visa stuff. Like that, it just is such a bummer all the time. Like there's never been like a good visa situation. It just is like if you hear about it, it's bad, and
Yeah.
there's really nothing you could do. I had another point that I wanted to make real quickly, but then I completely forgot what I was talking about. So we'll move on and we'll talk about all the money these players are making in the CDL. Um, I think there was kind of a polarizing reaction, I would say. Not in like some people were like, this is really good that this leaked, and then there were people like that were really bad. It was, this is really accurate from one side, and then the other people were like, this is really inaccurate. So we're gonna take everything with a grain of salt, but then we're gonna just like shove that salt right into our mouths and eat it. So over the last week, there was a document being spread around the CDL or the COD community, and it's, I guess, like to some people, like Zuma, for example, and quite a few other players in the CDL said, like, yeah, this seems like pretty spot on. Granted, it's like more general. It's not like an exact dollar figure or whatever, but I'm going to pull it up on the stream so people can see it if they're watching on YouTube, or if you're watching on Spotify, you can see it. So this was, you can look up on Jacob Hale's Twitter at Jake Hale with three E's if you want to actually look for yourself. But it's pretty cut and dry. It shows all of the teams, all of their players, and the money that they're making. Allegedly, their alleged salaries. So, I mean, the first thing that jumped out to me was like, Celium is getting paid how much? According to this document, he's getting paid $850,000, which the rumor was $1 million over the off season. You never really know what the rumor like is actually like, how true it is. But if this is true, then he's making, I think, double or close to double what the next highest player is getting paid, and that would be Hydra and Scrap. They are making, according to this document, $450,000. So he's getting paid nearly double what the reigning MVP and a former champs MVP is also getting paid. So just on that, I guess, is like a pretty crazy thing. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say the whole thing with Celium is that's how it started with the $1 million number, but then it got like, if you remember it, it was like a little bit of a bidding war seemingly between Thieves and Falcons, and then it was like and even FaZe was in the conversation, and then Zuma was basically the clip I remember was like he got an offer that you just can't turn down, and that's what this basically is, like almost $2 million for a 2-year contract. That's what the rumor got to, I feel like, and everyone's like, there's no way it's $2 million, $1 million a year for 2 years, but I mean this is pretty freaking close. So, um, that we'll get into all of this more, but from the Falcons' perspective, like the fact that Kismet only got 150,000 in comparison to the other numbers on this team, I feel bad for the Bulldog. But obviously, 150,000 is still a lot of money to play Call of Duty.
Yeah, and I mean their roster is one of the most expensive in the CDL. Selim takes up like a lot of that, obviously, but Pred $450,000. That makes him the second highest paid player, tied with Scrap and Hydra, and Xnid. That also jumped out to me as like $250,000 for a guy who, like, a lot of people are like, does he really deserve to be in on a CDL roster like half the time? And like, especially with some of the other salaries that players that like are much better than Xnid, like kind of undisputably, like to me, that's a crazy salary, and that feels like he's our boy, and like we're gonna like really reward him. Optic was also the one that jumped out. Was like, your mind just instantly is like, what does Optic make? Like, because Scump would probably be like kind of up there near Celium if I had to bet. Like if
he's over Celium.
Yeah, so like his salary would be like crazy, but obviously according to this, Shotzi makes 425,000, kind of expected. Former MVP, like multiple time world champion, the face of the Optic franchise. Mercules 250 grand. So Mercules and Xnid. I don't know which one you'd rather have for 250 grand, but that's kind of the deal that Optic made. What are some of the things, I guess, that were like your biggest takeaways or things that really interested you from this document?
So some names one name you didn't even mention is Hook, and that like illustrates the point I'm about to make here. But I think that the 280 alleged figure for Hook is more than fair, especially given like the talent and what he's done throughout his career. But the following statement that I'm gonna make, like, I'm just gonna say because I'm babbling at this point. So Hook is being paid more than Carolina, Cloud9, and Vancouver's entire rosters.
Yep.
And the point here is that's Hook. That's not like Celium or Pred or Dashy or Hydra. That's like Hook is making more than 3 entire CDL teams, allegedly. That's pretty mind blowing to me. And that was like the first thing. Like, I was looking at this document, seeing like what mark would be there for like a guy who is literally being paid more than 4 other players combined. And that's the one I found. Obviously, some of the wiggle room and stuff that could in theory change that, but allegedly, reportedly, whatever, based on this document, that's what it looks like, that Hook is being paid more than 3 entire rosters, which is pretty crazy. And then you look at the Cloud9 situation. That was the one I immediately looked at, because it's like there was the rumor that they would be like the lowest salaried team in CDL history or whatever, and it's not that far off. I mean, it's technically higher than Carolina by 5,000, because according to the document, like, you would spread out the extra 10,000 that Slasher has over the 3 guys. If you spread that to just one other guy, that would be 65-65 and then 60-60. So it's actually 10,000. Carolina's roster is $10,000 cheaper than Cloud9's, allegedly, reportedly, potentially. So that was one direction for how I looked at this. The Boston with Snoopy getting the bag, like, that's good on him.
Yeah,
I
good
mean,
for him.
for a team like Boston that, rumors over the last couple of years about them even being in the CDL still, or continuing to field a team, to have Snoopy being paid like some of these guys. He's basically being paid like Estriel and Kremp combined, Mamba and Skies combined. Like he's being paid effectively what some other teams are paying 2 of their players. Shout out Snoopy for that. Like, good on him. And then the Gentlemates, that's, well, I do have to, with a grain of salt, some of the people that did comment on this, I saw Ogre 2, which I didn't realize, according to his Twitter bio, he's still the GM of
Yeah.
Miami Heretics.
Yeah.
I knew he was involved with Florida Mutineers. I did not realize he's still involved with Heretics, but Ogre 2 said, I know more than a handful of these that aren't accurate, so this is definitely not an official leaked list. Not sure what this is. So that's part of
Could
the
I jump in real quick?
other side. Go.
So it's a good point because I was going to bring up Arian, the Cloud9 coach. He also commented on and said, like, this is wildly inaccurate. And then Ogre 2 comes out and he says, this is wildly inaccurate. I'm just going to point out that these two people involved have two of allegedly the lowest salaried, lowest paid teams in the CDL. And when you have low paid players, especially Miami, because Miami is like definitely much better, much higher potential than Cloud9, it is in their best interest to be like, this is bullcrap. Like, these guys don't get paid like let's say like LAT or Minnesota, not Minnesota, but like Paris or whatever. It's like those guys don't get paid nearly as much as this document says. Please don't ask for a raise when we do our negotiations next offseason. That's kind of the vibe it gave off. Not saying that they're wrong. Like, they could be correct, and they definitely have more inside knowledge than either one of us. I'm just saying that they would appear to have kind of a vested interest in keeping these salaries more reasonable, as in the case of Miami or Cloud9. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, the only other thing I was going to add to that, the other names that I saw saying like this isn't accurate, as opposed to, we didn't even mention it, but it was the Zuma clip that first I saw of this saying it looked accurate to him, and Legend was in the call because Legend is playing for Stallions now, and Rambo Ray was in the call. I forget what Rambo said because he's helping coach some of the Stallions teams or whatever. But Legend was the one who said, yeah, it's accurate for me. So Legend came straight out and said like that was legit for him. But I saw Ogre 2, and then Purge responded to Jacob Hale's tweet with a cap, like the hat emoji, so cap. And then Sib responded to Purge saying, think ours might be worse. They got ours completely wrong. So I don't know. That's the one from Sib is the only case where I'm like, I don't know if that's
I mean, that definitely seemingly indicates
thing.
that they get paid a lot less than what they're being. Like,
does it? Because
there's no way that, like, they're like the fourth highest paid team on this list, and like,
yeah,
I mean, why would he be like, yeah, I get paid like $300,000, like, instead of 180 or whatever it is.
That was my initial reaction to Sib's tweet, was like, maybe it is in the other direction, but I guess in you're breaking it down like that, it wouldn't make a ton of sense. So maybe that's one that's not. I was actually, that was one of the teams that I was saying when we were breaking it down. Like, I was pretty surprised by the numbers for General Mates, but I guess maybe it would make sense if the numbers aren't as high for them. I don't know.
I was just saying,
the
like,
talent on the team deserves that, if anything.
I would just say, as like non-lawyer, I mean, my sister is a lawyer, but I will give my legal, non-legal, don't follow this advice. But if someone says you make a ton of money, you're just gonna have to go with that. That's a lie that you can take in life and keep moving forward. Because if you say, I don't make 180,000, I make 90,000. So when you go in negotiations next offseason or 2 off seasons from now, and they're like, well, we know you make 90,000, we know you don't make 180, so we're gonna offer you like 120. That's a good raise for you. Instead of being like, I think you make 180. Like, could you take 180 this season? Like, we can't really go any higher than that. Like, that's a raise that you should be able to get just based on the rumor and innuendo of like what's going on. So that's my thing with that. I just don't see anybody coming out and being like, it's ridiculous that they got my number so wrong. Like, I just make so much more money than this. I just that to me wouldn't make a ton of sense. But I mean, who knows? Like, with all of this stuff, like, I think a lot of it is guesswork. Maybe some of this is, I'm sure, accurate, or just like the guesses are around the same dollar figure. But I think Boston is kind of like, it jumps out, just like they get paid a lot more than you would think, considering like C9 and Carolina, and even Heretics is kind of like a weird, like Trake's is getting made like quite a bit less than everybody else. And I also thought. Or no, what were you gonna say?
I was just the Miami thing is weird because obviously you assume Rencor and Super were just like on 1+1 deals from last year, and that might have
Yeah.
been like, but maybe because it's 90,000, not this other, like 60, 65 range. Maybe they were on that last year and got a little bump. I don't know, but yeah, didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, I mean that could be the case, or maybe they just had like an internal minimum when they were going through those contracts, and then when Trakes came up because he wasn't like the first option. The first option was obviously keeping Real, which also jumped out to me as like if these numbers are accurate, then I would assume he was getting paid around the same money that like Meadows, Rincor, and Super were, which was 90,000. On this, he's getting paid 150,000 by Toronto. I mean, that seems like a good enough bump to like break your word, quote unquote, or whatever they said. He like gave a verbal agreement to Miami to return, and then he goes to Toronto. Like, I mean, that makes sense to me. Um, I'm trying to think like if anything else really pops out on this list. Like, not. I mean, the only other thing was Kenny and Ghosty because like those are like like those are the comparisons that I tend to make in my mind, and I think like Ghosty makes $5,000 more than Kenny does, and like he's worth way more on your team than $5,000, like more than Kenny. So we'll see how that works out. Like LAT, they saved $5,000. Let's just say something like that. I don't know how much he would have gotten paid. Like if because he was on an LAT contract, right? Because he was like a restricted free agent, if I'm not mistaken. And then, or I don't think his contract was up. I think they just kind of like released him, if I'm not mistaken, LAT with Ghosty. So maybe he had to sign a new contract with
Yeah,
Paris, and maybe he took a pay cut because Paris wasn't going to be willing to pay what LAT is paying. Because if you look at their salaries, like 450 for Hydra, 450 for Scrap, 300 for Abizi, that would like Kenny is like quite a bit lower than the rest of them. So that just makes me think like something was going on there.
yeah. So I think some other things we can just breeze through. One of the most interesting sagas from the offseason was the Real bidding war
Yeah.
and Miami versus Toronto. And if he's getting 150 from Toronto, uh, totally makes sense though how that all went down because
Yeah. For sure.
seemingly Miami wasn't going to meet that number. Obviously, they could have made an offer close to that, but just based on the other alleged salaries here, it wouldn't make sense if he was like super high over
Mm-hmm.
Rencor and Super previously. And the fact that Toronto maybe swung in and threw this 150 number at him at the last minute, and he was like, "Yeah, screw a verbal agreement. I'm taking 150K." I could see that being how it worked out. So that is interesting. Another element, and it ties into what we were talking about with Legend and Vancouver earlier. If you look at the guys from the Vancouver team last year, it's 04 Nabuza at 175, Nasty at 100, and Neptune at 220. So Nasty is the lowest paid player from that team at 100,000, and that would be the highest paid player on Vancouver. So obviously, in hindsight, based on Vancouver's performances last year, it would make sense if that was part of the reason why that roster didn't stay together because those four guys all thought they deserved more than what they potentially were getting paid last year, and that caused them to go their separate ways. So that's another interesting element to all of this. I think that's pretty much it. Shout out Kleenex for having 10,000 more than Joe Deceives allegedly is the highest paid player on Toronto. I thought that was kind of funny. That's like the only number that's like not a nice round number, just 210 randomly. I guess the 175s and 285 for Draza. Some of them aren't like solid round numbers, but 210 was the most obscure number I felt like. So, but maybe Kleenex was just like, yeah, I'll come back for a little bit more than Joe, and Toronto was like, yeah, okay, here's an extra 10K.
Yeah.
So I thought that was funny. But yeah, obviously, end of the day, don't know how much of this is actually true. Seemingly, some of it is, and some of it isn't. That's probably the most we'll ever get. But just the fact that we even had this visual and had some sort of idea for a ballpark was really cool. Like I said, I was staring at it for a good chunk of time that first day. December 18th would have been, or maybe the 17th when it first dropped. I was looking at it for a while, and I was trying to do the math in my head to see like the whole hook being paid more than players. Like what was the lowest a guy could be being paid and still being paid more than some of these entire teams. Um, so yeah, I think it's very interesting. Um, Definitely does put into perspective some of this. I think there was a clip of Aches talking about uh, some of the teams. It was a pretty funny clip. The flank has been on fire recently with all of this, but it was like Aches like emphatically saying like only 6 teams are trying or something like that, and it was
Yeah.
kind of like, I mean that is one way of looking at it. There is the other angle to it, and it's all like, a team like Minnesota. We aren't really talking about it like they aren't the lowest paying team out there. They aren't the highest, but they're still, you know giving decent salaries to these guys and giving them the opportunity to make something happen. And it's not like, this world beating roster, but it's a roster that has potential. So you're paying like, that the Minnesota roster to me sticks out as an example of a team where it's like you're not getting paid the minimum. Maybe it is the minimum because that was the whole report. Like you had to pay based on the minimum of the state. So maybe that's like the reason why it's 75. Maybe that's like the state minimum for Minnesota or whatever. I don't know. But outside looking in, to me, this is a roster where it's like you're seemingly not getting paid the minimum, and it's a team that we put together that still has the potential to cause some chaos, pull off some upsets, maybe get some wins. But it's not going to be a team that necessarily contends for championships or, um, is lifting a trophy at the end of the day. So that's like an interesting middle ground to me. I guess Boston would even be a better middle ground just because they had that. That's probably, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling at this point. The Boston numbers definitely surprised me though, just given the whole like rumors of the state of that organization and everything like that. But yeah, I had a ton of fun. I know a lot of people really enjoyed this. I texted you as soon as this dropped and I was like, we could probably do like a 3-hour episode just on this alone. And I still think I could like dissect this even further, but this is a lot of fun for me to like just have some visual, whether everything is exactly correct to a T or not. Um, that's obviously going to be a big question regarding all this, but I regardless, to have some numbers attached to names, whether they're exactly on the dot or off a little bit here and there, it was a fun exercise.
Yeah, the aches part that you said, like that also stuck out to me, is like this seems to be, even if they're like remotely accurate, not saying like exact dollar figures, but if the trend is accurate, then it's kind of like Major League Baseball where you just have like these really big spending teams,
Yeah,
and sometimes it works out for them, sometimes it doesn't. And some of these teams that are like, penny pinchers or like a lot smaller, at least in revenue, they're able to get like similar results out of it, even though they're paying like far, far less. Like I was just looking at like, so if you just combine G2, Carolina, Cloud9, Vancouver, and Miami, so that's 5 teams, almost half the league. Those 5 teams pay like 1.4 million collectively in their player salaries. The Riyadh Falcons, they're paying more than that for their roster alone. And
yeah,
they are like, it remains to be seen whether they're an actual contender, right? Like we don't even know what they're going to be. Like even a team like, I mean, even Boston, for example, like Boston's paying 250 plus 100, like they're paying $400,000 plus for their roster allegedly. And they're a team that finished 8th in the regular season last year and are very likely going to be in a similar situation this year, and they're getting paid like almost like 1.5 times what a team like uh Carolina might. And Carolina's probably in about the same boat as Boston is in terms of like whether they're going to compete for champs, like into compete for like champs, like 8th place or whatever, like to get to champs. So I think this is like all really interesting. Obviously, we don't know how accurate it is. I think some of them seem high just in general. I should say, just because like like Boston, for example, like you're telling me like some of these guys are getting paid like $80,000-$100,000 when their org is like on its deathbed and there's no minimum salary in the league. Like that plays into it. And the minimum salary was what, like 55,000 or so when they had it. So why would Boston of all teams be like, let's pay these guys like 1.5 times over the minimum? Like that doesn't, pass the smell test. But again, like if the trend is correct, if it's all relative, and we know that like Riyadh is paying like much more than all these other teams, even though they're not like a championship contender seemingly, that does give you something to go off of. That does give you an idea of what's happening here. And I hope that we get more like official stuff. I would love to get like official salaries and contract terms, like traditional sports. But
Yeah.
we need to get to collective bargaining, and we need to get to like a players union and actual minimum and maximum, and like a salary cap and like benefits for these players and teams. Like there needs to be a lot more before that, before we get to actual contracts being leaked and reported on regularly. So yeah.
Yeah, that's all I was going to say there. Is I think we are very far off
Oh yeah.
from getting there. So that was part of the reason why I was so excited to even just have like this is like a breadcrumb of a shred of possible truth was so exciting to me, because I don't think the CDL will ever get to a point where it's like the current MLB offseason where we get reports of
No.
uh, the exact terms of contracts, years, and guarantees, and no trade clauses, and salary numbers, and all that, and then the teams officially announce the moves. Like, I don't think we're anywhere close to all that, but I would love to be wrong on that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe something like this where people are like, they're like people in the league, their eyes are open to like who's making what, what is going on here. Maybe that's the only way. I mean, we haven't talked about it, like not for a while, but like it really does take the biggest players typically to sign on to something like that, where it's like, yeah, like let's start a union and like let's make sure that we get the best outcome here. And so that would take like obviously Celium and Shotzi and Dashi and Hydra and Scrap and Simp and Celium and Abizi, and like all these players would have to like come together and be like, yeah, like we want to make sure that guys are taken care of. That's just not something that typically happens. And who knows how Microsoft would react to something like that, because we're much more like, or much more, we're much closer to the death of the CDL than like us getting even like regularly leaked rosters, roster contracts and stuff. Like we're much closer to the CDL just like completely vanishing than we are to getting like transparency in the CDL. Last but not least, Major Maniac. He is now the head coach of the Chicago Huntsmen, the Optic Challengers team. Great for Major Maniac. Like I think he's a cool dude.
Yep.
And that roster is interesting. We talked about it a little bit, whenever it was announced. Like they have guys that I had literally never heard of before. But I mean, that's kind of what you want from a Challengers team, in all honesty, especially one that Optic has. They do have Renegade, who's a former Halo pro. He's like definitely the most well-known guy on that team. But congrats to Major Maniac. Any thoughts on this this new coach for the Huntsmen?
Yeah, that's basically how I thought of it. I'm absolutely thrilled for Major Maniac. This is a great opportunity for someone. At the time, whenever this was a couple months ago, we talked about when he like announced that he was retiring and trying to go into coaching and stuff like that. So I definitely remember us talking about that, but like getting an opportunity like this to coach a team that's affiliated with Optic is really good for him. We know of his mind for the game and what he was able to do in his time while playing, despite, you know, some of the teams he was on maybe he didn't have the most gun skill of some of his players and stuff, but he was willing to sit in the hill for let Simpabizi and those guys run around. He was really good at S&D, and I think that's the most important part here about this signing is for someone like Renegade. where again I feel like all of these segments we're tying it back in with Legend, or at least I am. Um, Someone like Major Maniac who has that mind for S&D and stuff can do so well for someone like Renegade who doesn't have any experience playing an S&D like mode in Halo, and that's something that would have uh, probably did well for Legend, and maybe now if he's on Stallions with Rambo Ray, like getting some of that, just having a strong coach, and again tying it back in with the NFL stuff and examples you were making, like having someone to learn from when you're new to the scene, new to the league and everything like that is so important. And I think Major Maniac being able to teach Renegade S&D stuff, and obviously for all the other modes, but S&D in particular is where my mind went. I think that could be invaluable to Renegade's development as a potential COD pro, and I think that could be, maybe if we're looking at this when eventually Legend and Renegade are both in the CDL, if it gets to that point, this could be like one of the turning points where, now that Legend is with Stallions, it's not necessarily the same because he'll have help from Zuma and uh, Rambo Ray, and I think even Havoc is playing with him, which is awesome because I know you and I have talked how much we like Havoc. Um, but just that for guys like Legend and Renegade to be in a position coming over to COD after never competing in it, having someone like Major Maniac for Renegade and potentially those other names for Legend now, like I feel like that's invaluable, and that's where I'm excited to see how this develops for Major Maniac going forward, if he gets a shot in the CDL after this start with the Huntsman, and then how this works for Renegade in particular.
Yeah, the biggest thing for challengers, like we talk about in the CDL, most of the time, like Vancouver this season is a rare case, but most of the time in the CDL, it's like, can you just win some matches? Can you get to 8th place? Can you compete for a championship? With challengers, with many players, it's like, who are your teammates? Like, not even if you're competing for the like a cup, but like, are you getting a good experience out of this? Like Fellow is like, he's a great teammate to have in challengers. Like, I mean, if we lived in a just world where like challengers was fully supported and like the CDL teams like invested in challengers, all of them, Fellow would have like a statue outside of someone's building where it's just like he is the challengers guy. Like he's the guy that we're going to put on our challengers roster every year to mentor these players. And he has like a pretty good track record of it. He's like a really easygoing personality. So he's not like, he is the veteran presence that you want a lot of times with these players. And we'll see it with Alluka because obviously like they've been teammates. Brack is another challengers player that like he has a ton of experience and like he seems to get the best out of his teammates. But that's really the thing is like, who are you playing with and who are you getting coached by? And, there's just a really solid track record for a lot of these coaches and a lot of these players where they kind of have like the Midas touch and their teammates just end up doing well once they move up to the CDL level. And, Rambo Ray has like just, I mean, he had it when he was a player, like in, pre CWL, where he was just like, he's not the most talented player. He's never been the most talented player, but he's ridiculously smart. And he just has like the touch with his teammates. And they seem to love him and they seem to do really well with him. And that translated into being a coach, as we saw with Vancouver last year, where nobody was really expecting that roster to do anything, and then they went to the most grand finals of any team in the league. So whether it's Rambo Ray, whether it's Major Maniac, I know Nagafin is a coach in Challengers as well. Our boy Temp, I don't know what's going to be the future of Bush Gaming because if TJ leaves, I don't know who they're replacing him with.
Fire 40.
All right, so that's interesting.
And it was a really funny moment when Jersey Jerry learned that Fire, Spart, and Prolute are all Hispanic in some form.
Here we go.
And he actually, because there's like a joke with Jersey Jerry having a thing for Latinas and stuff, so he made a joke about having a Latina COD team, and I thought that was really funny. That was a Jersey Jerry moment.
Yeah, so this is gonna be really interesting. This is also I think every episode this season we have talked about challengers at some point in
Yep.
time. So maybe we're a challengers podcast. That's what people are saying. Um, yeah, that does it, I think, for us today. Obviously, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody. Um, we are most definitely not going to be back before Christmas, but we will be back probably soon after Christmas. But yeah, I mean, we had a lot to talk about. We had planned previously to do like a wish list like we did last year before Christmas. But then we had like literally all of this, like, Bink said at the top of the show that, it didn't look like we had a ton on the notes, but just with the way we talk about certain topics, it ended up being nearly 90 minutes of, I think, a pretty good discussion.
Yeah.
And so we'll do, I texted Bink this before we did the show today, but we'll probably do our wish list with like our New Year's resolutions and stuff all in one show. And that'll be sometime next week. And yeah, I really appreciate all the support that we have received for this calendar year, whether we see you before New Year's or not. It's been an awesome year as a podcast. We are nearly at 270 YouTube subscribers. I don't know how many shows we did this year. Definitely the most that we've done in any year.
Oh yeah.
But like we did a lot, and we just always appreciated the support that you guys gave us. Please make sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the podcast feed wherever you're listening or watching on. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, as well as YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at jbank with 2Ks, at Preston Byers, and the podcast tour is at Ego Chall Podcast. Not exactly sure when our next show will be. It will certainly be before we do like our prediction show for week 3 of the qualifying matches. Like that won't be our return show at all. I can assure you that. But not exactly sure when, because I'm going out of town in a few days. Obviously, I don't know if anybody would be listening or watching Christmas. Like, if you're watching us on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, then you are a true challer, and maybe we'll make you an honorary correspondent at some point in time. But yeah, that does it for me. Bink, take it away.
Yeah, I never even told you. Actually, no, we might have talked about it. There was the CDL rewards, where one of the emblems that you gave is certified Ego Challer or whatever. So that is my emblem in Black Ops 7 right now when you do
Sweet.
like the emblem and calling card thing. Um, but yeah, like you said, shout out everybody, whether we're back or not. Obviously, if we're back before 2026, we'll probably repeat ourselves here. But really do appreciate all the support and everything this year. I just scrolled down, and episode 139 was a year ago, and episode there was another 141 was the wish list. That's what I was looking to um for our notes or whatever, but that 141 or 142, one of those was 11 months ago. So we are somewhere around at least 60-ish episodes, and that doesn't even count all the multiple videos you did for like pulling stuff from episodes and making them their own videos and whatnot. So definitely most content we've ever done this year, and everyone should shout out Preston because obviously he does all that work behind the scenes and everything. I just do the yapping and the notes really. So shout out Preston for everything. Shout out you guys for all the support. It really does mean a lot. And yeah, we'll be back at some point. Whenever it is, if it's after 2025 ends and everything. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, all that good stuff. And we will be back at some point to talk more Call of Duty, CDL, and everything. So thank you guys as always, and remember to send the chow.